since you're host, okay, cool, thank you. And cool, it looks like Robin dropped the slides in the chat if anyone wants to follow along that way. So I'll share my screen again and we can get started. So these are our active Central Coast work plans. Well, I guess Walnut isn't quite active now, but we're going to focus on PSMS, Walnut Ave, the two JML ones. And we'll get into each of these specific, but just an overview. And then we also have a couple slides on some other projects like the TCP pilot in West as well. But I'll give it over to the PSMS team. I think Robin's going to take it away. And I think for anyone presenting on this, just let me know when you want to switch slides and I can do that.
Great. Thanks, Mikkel. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. So the PSMS stands for Pajaro, Sunny Mesa, and Springfield, which are three separate water systems owned and operated by the Pajaro, Sunny Mesa PSM CSD Community Service District. So the project has a pretty long history even before CWC got involved, and since CWC's been involved, back in 2019, the community formed El Comité to come together on these drinking water issues. The primary contaminants in the community, in the domestic well community, are nitrates and 1,2,3-TCP. So the photo on the left is from 2019, and the photo on the right is from our most recent Platica in the community. And so you go to the next slide. The PSMS project will consolidate three large water systems and about 75 domestic well reliant households. And the Springfield water system, which you can see in the bottom of the graphic, is currently in construction. And once that's complete, it that system will be incorporated into the broader PSMS project. So maybe go to the next slide. I just wanted to share a few construction photos and updates from the Springfield construction. Right now we're in the phase of lateral installation, and many of you remember being at the well site shown on the left back in May of 2025. And now you can see those water storage tanks there, and they're installing hydrants. Next slide. And this is the lateral installation that was completed last week at Ignacio's house, where we hold the community meetings. Next slide. So right now in the project, we've completed 30% designs and a large amount of the environmental planning, the CEQA documentation, and are continuing permitting and now getting into the 60% design. Overall, the project across those three water systems and the domestic well communities, which are served by either compilations of those domestic wells that form state small water systems and locally regulated water systems and individual wells. All of those homes together are about 850. And right now, we have about 75% of domestic well households that have committed to the project and signed consolidation agreements. So a huge shout out to the advocacy team and Saul for building really beautiful and robust relationships with the community there, and being able to answer everyone's concerns and questions and navigate what it means to give up your well and be part of a water district, and all the things that go with that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in 2019, El Comité was formed. Before that, there was CWC was facilitating a well testing program to understand the needs of the community, and then after that, also developed secured funding for interim drinking water for bottled water for the community. So the community is currently on bottled water. Um, and I'll just ask if Myra or Saul want to add anything here about the history of the PSMS community and the project that you want to share.
Sure, I can jump in and share that the bottled water program that supplies or provides water to the folks out in PSMS is actually different from our regional bottled water program because this was the first community that we started organizing in back in November of 2018 originally. And so once we um, came together, learned more about folks' water quality. We started looking at both interim and long-term solutions. And so the comité formed in February of 2019. And then we started looking at funding for this interim solution. And we had a group of 3 community partners go out to the CSD's board meeting to advocate for them to apply for this Cleanup and Abatement Act funding, which is what now provides the bottled water there. So it's a little different, but it just goes to show how, when folks come together over a concern and, have collective power, they can advocate for their needs and then get the interim solutions that they need in place. Because the bottled water program started in July of 2019 for them. So it was a pretty quick process considering how slow things move in our work. So just a little detail there.
Great. Thank you so much, Myra. Um, so the project expanded from the Springfield project to include, it was originally going to be 90, now it's about 75 homes that are not part of Springfield, ha households served by domestic wells or those state small systems. And due to other reliability and contamination issues in the other water systems that the district runs in that area, the project turned into a consolidation of a regional system to be able to build resiliency around flood vulnerability. That was a big issue after the Pajaro floods, and also deal with chromium 6 contamination in the Sunny Mesa water system, as well as iron and manganese above the MCL in the Pajaro water system. Um, Next slide. So, yeah, I mentioned those 3 systems. They each have their own challenges with quality and quantity. Water systems are provided to have multiple sources, and that wasn't being met in certain systems. And so the regional consolidation is going to be able to provide robust water sources. New storage tanks are a component of the project overall, and the project has been split into 2 phases. Many of you will remember that we were intending to receive an EPA Community Change Grant to implement phase 1 of the project. And instead, we have gained State Water Board funding to fund phase 1 through their Expedited Drinking Water Grant program, which is funding through the emerging contaminants. And so the project is carrying forward under 2 phases, and 100% design is currently being conducted under phase 1, and the environmental planning and permitting. And then just in terms of timeline, construction is slated to begin for phase 1 in March 2027, and phase 2 will follow shortly after. So the switch from the EPA to the State Water Board grant luckily, the State Water Board was able to fund the whole 33 million for phase one of the project, and things seem to be going forward smoothly. There are two different funding packages, so the administration around that has been a little bit of something to learn how to navigate, but grateful that that funding came through and we were able to keep this project moving on that timeline and utilize that funding that the State Water Board has that needs to be utilized in the next years. So I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah. Um, what do I want to say about this? I think the interest has been really good. People seem to, you know, be able to have their questions answered and be engaged in the process and the project. And again, a lot of that is definitely thanks to the great relationships that CWC has with the community. Um, I think a lot of similar concerns that we see in these different projects of people trusting the water source and wanting to understand different things about the project. So that's been a kind of engaging and fun aspect to navigate alongside the design and construction and community services district. Um, Next slide.
Hey, Robin,
Yeah.
can you talk about a little bit about how it's very helpful to have a cooperative public water agency involved in the project? Because we don't see that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a huge point. And every time another team member talks about a challenge they have, I feel really blessed to work with um, the CSD that we do. They're really engaged. They're a small team so that um, while they could use a little bit more capacity, they're very focused on providing good quality water and taking care of the needs of the folks in their service areas. And they're really great to work with. Judy at the district is a really great partner in all of this, and these funding sources are channeled through the community services district. So, since we've uh, for the final design and construction that'll be channeled through the district, and CWC's role is to support the district and whatever they need to carry that through and continue bridging between residents and other project partners. But yeah, it is really great to see how effective and smooth projects can be when um, the district as a project partner is really does whatever it takes to get the project done with a really good attitude.
Robin, one thing that's interesting too, though, just thinking about that, is that maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, the CSD's position was like initially, we don't really want to take on this PSMS project until Springfield's done. And so there was like initially some hesitation around that. And I think it took some time to really like work with them to understand how to kind of do both simultaneously in trying to support that. And so I think like it just highlights that it's not always right away that these relationships are like so productive, but it took a lot of time working with Judy and the board to figure out how to like get into those places. So I think it also highlights some of our TA team in the work that they do to build those relationships with the boards to like understand and listen to their concerns and then think about creative ways to make sure that we're advancing these kind of projects without more delays.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that input. And we know how long it takes to move these projects forward, and so it would just be way too long if we were to wait till final completion of one to start going on another. And so it's really great to see that momentum being able to keep building to move things forward. And really want to highlight and illuminate the work of the team that got this project to where it was when I started in June and was able to keep it moving, and know how much legwork that was to develop it to that point. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the phases. Ideally, this project would have been done in one phase, but given the large funding requirements, that was a part of splitting it up. Again, the transition from EPA to the State Water Board, and the SAC office says, could you provide a brief overview of how the two projects are connected? Are we talking about phase one and phase two? Or Springfield and broader PSMS? PSMS in Springfield. So Springfield will become part of PSMS. It will be one of the three systems that's consolidated into the regional consolidation. And Springfield and Sunny Mesa and Pajaro are already all owned and operated by the CSD. And then so Springfield's like a phase one of the I don't know, phase zero of the PSMS project that then will it'll be connected to the entire system. The well that's going to serve Springfield will be prioritized for Springfield, but it has the ability to be connected to the entire system for added reliability. And then in addition to those water systems, the north of Moss Landing area is the 75 homes that will be connected, and that's the phase two. So phase one is the consolidation of these three main water systems and additional things like booster pump station, transmission lines, rehabilitation of existing water storage tanks, iron and manganese treatment. And phase two is connecting the 75 households in the north of Moss Landing area where it says private well area there. Thank you, Mikhail. So 32 of those houses are run by, there's 2 state small water systems and 9 locally regulated water systems, and then 43 homes are on domestic wells. So it's a mix of how people interact with their water source and system.
And then
This,
I'll also, oh, do you have a question, David?
I was just going to say that this is a good example of regionalization. We talk about that somewhat in the San Joaquin Valley. This is a little bit different because it's one public agency, Pajaros PSM, but this is a project that links together several water systems and a domestic well area, kind of the type of project that we're looking for in other areas. So it's a good example.
Definitely. And I was just going to add that technically this is phase zero because when we initially started organizing in this area, we started organizing in the Bluff, Jensen, Trafton, Springfield Roads area. And then through our work, we later found out that there had been other organizations working with folks on Springfield Road, and that Springfield Road was actually working on a long-term solution, but their barrier was that there was no funding available to continue moving forward with that project. And so the Springfield project area was more advanced with their long-term solution than the other areas that are within the private well shaded green area. So that's why it just worked out that way because there was already a solution in place that the CSD was working on. They just had the barrier of no funding available to continue moving forward with the actual implementation of the project. And then that's where we came in and started working on advocating for that funding, and also that was when SAFER was passed, and so a lot of different little things happened to keep that project moving forward. So, a little background there.
Thank you so much. So where we are now, just moving forward, is continuing our community outreach and engagement, education. We're learning a lot through the Springfield implementation and also appreciate all that we've learned from the Valley's implementation, thinking about what to look for and lessons learned and carrying that forward into PSMS. Um, uh, Mid-year, we plan to secure funding for phase 2 of the project, and have the final design completed, and go out to bid. So yeah, I think that's all there. Yeah. Okay. I did add, I think you might be sharing a different one, but for anyone that's interested, and I think it's good timing to move on now, but I did add some additional slides of the project area that show the phase construction and if you want to kind of zoom into the project map. So folks can look at that. And I'll pass it back to Mikkel for JML. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, folks have any other questions on those projects we just talked about, feel free to drop them in the chat or connect with Robin or the team. But yeah, I'll give it over to Shirley to start us with JML.
My part is going to be short. So we're going to talk about Johnson, McGuinness, and Live Oak Road. We call it JML for short. And before we change the slide, these are 3 pictures of some of the community meetings that we have. We try to have one each quarter. I cannot add all those pictures, but these pictures are 3 of the main ones. So we can go to the next slide. I started working on JML back in at the end of 2021, but I think CWC started working in the area at the end of 2019. So it was during kind of COVID. So at the beginning, when we started working in this project, it was hard first because, the social distance and COVID. And also because before we started working in the community, another organization was working with them and some things happened. So people was like, they didn't really trust us at the beginning because of a lot of reasons. But after CWC, I wasn't there, but they started like trying to reach some community members and having some community meetings. They formed a community-based organization at the beginning of 2021, and they call it GOTA. There's Gente Organizada Trabajando por el Agua. In English is People United Working for Water. So it was formed, I think, for about they have 11 members, if I'm not wrong. And then when I start working, we start testing some wells with the regional well testing program. We tested about 76 wells. Unfortunately, more than 88% of these wells have at least one contaminant. And that's why we started providing bottled water. And currently we have over 192 households that receive bottled water through the Central Coast Regional Water Board program. And I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, next slide. This is a map of the project area. And I mean, it's hard to see, but the reason why we call it Johnson, McGuinness, and Live Oak is because those 3 streets are the main ones in the project area, but it's more than those 3 streets. We have a Betty Lane, Lode Lane, Holbrook. This is the picture of the area. And next slide. As I mentioned it before, right now we are expecting to connect 219 households. We call it connections. And the main reason we are connecting all these houses is because when we tested it, the wells, like the majority of the houses have at least one contaminant. And we can go to the next slide and I can explain which contaminants are in the area. So as I mentioned before, in the area is over 160 wells, and we tested like 76 of those. And the majority have at least two contaminants. The main contaminants in the area are nitrate, chrom-6, 1,2,3 TCP. And currently we tested some households for PFAS. We tested like 15 wells, and 11 of them have PFAS on it. And that's why this is a big concern for the community, because doesn't matter if they put a filtration system for nitrate when they also have TCP, they have PFAS, so it's not even point for them to spend money in this type of filtration system. So they need a long-term solution, and that's why they create GOTA to talk about, organize about water concerns. And we can go to the next slide. And right now, currently, because of that, okay, the community requested a technical assistant, and we completed the feasibility study last year, and we just completed the PER. The option for the community is connected to a nearby water system that is called Calwater Las Lomas. About 208 of the houses in the area, they want the long-term solution. The other, 10, they still like unsure, because you know how hard is. They want to make sure the project is fully funded, because it is an expensive project. So right now, some of them, they're still not sure, but I think they will change their mind once we get the funding. But the majority, I think more than 90% of the people in the area wants this project to happen. We were working on getting all the letters of intent from property owners, and we currently have over 136 letters of intent signed for drinking water and wastewater. I think we can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned before, we completed the feasibility study back in 2024. We completed the PER last month. And right now we are working on the 30% design of the project. Next slide. And I think that's it for drinking water. I don't know if Mikel or Brandon or Mayra want to add anything about drinking water before we move to wastewater.
I'll just add a couple little things. That was really great, Shirley. Thanks. I think similar to the point that David brought up with working with the Pajaro Sunny Mesa Community Services District, working with Cal Water in this community has been similarly pretty smooth. They're very open, willing to have this consolidation happen, and have been supportive and transparent throughout the process, which is nice. There has been, with all of our projects, there's challenges. And I think one of the big ones that we've been tackling here recently is, funding. This is a lot of connections. It's a big area. There's no current infrastructure, so it's a very expensive project. It's especially expensive per connection. And so we've been really working hard to confirm the appropriate funding pathway, similar to the PSMS area. We applied for the EPA change grant, which we did not get. But we have recently, and we announced this in a staff meeting recently, we did confirm that with the State Water Board, with DFA, that the emerging contaminants pot of funding would be eligible for this project, which is huge. Great news, because there's no cost per connection cap on that funding. And so, as Shirley mentioned, we're moving full steam ahead now on design and kind of a lot of these other tasks that we were previously a little bit paused on, so that we can, use that funding, tap into it before it sunsets here in a few years. But yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but otherwise, really go for the wastewater side.
Okay, now we're going to talk about wastewater. The reason why we separate both projects is because at the beginning, the focus was drinking water. And we can go to the next slide. During all these years that we did outreach to all these households, one of their main concern was the septic systems. They have a lot of issues with them in the area. So they mentioned the priority for them was wastewater. And we bring it up. We share those concerns with the team. And that's why we start working on a wastewater project. And the reason why this is a concern for community members is because, as all you know, septic tanks are one of the primary reasons of contamination for nitrates. So this can be one of the reasons why it's a lot of nitrate in the area, besides agriculture, because it's a community around agriculture. Next slide. And I think we started working on wastewater last year, if I'm not wrong. We became a TA provider for wastewater. And we are working on the feasibility study. It was planned to be completed this month. I don't know if we are still on that track, but the option that they are recommended is consolidation with the Pájaros Sanitation District. The district is in the city of Watsonville, so that's the best option for the community. I think we can go to the next slide. And again, if we do this project, it's going to benefit around 219 households in the area. And same with the drinking water, we collected over 136 letters of intent. Next slide. And I think that's it for wastewater. It is a little bit behind from drinking water because we started later, but the goal is to complete both projects, maybe not at the same time, but eventually for them to have drinking water, safe drinking water, and also they don't have to have any more issues with the septic systems. And next slide. And I mean, these are just some pictures that we added of some community members. So these are some faces of the community. I think most of you know them, but yeah, these are some pictures. I don't know if Mikhail wants to add anything about wastewater.
No, that was great. Thanks, Shirley.
Any more
Move over to
questions?
Walnut Ave.
So Cal, so I think Walnut Ave is the Central Coast project that made Mikkel and Robin so thankful for their cooperative partners in their consolidation projects. We did not have such a smooth ride for Walnut Ave. So Walnut Ave is shorthand for this unincorporated area right outside the city of Greenfield, California. We use the shorthand Walnut Ave because a lot of the properties are on Walnut Avenue. And then there's a little area up here, a camp right here, and then there's a couple of households. Oh, you can't see my mouse. Okay, well, sorry. I was pointing to things that you can't see. But this is or was the general project area right outside Greenfield. And we sampled, I think, 9 domestic wells in the area, and 100% of them, oh, you can go to the next slide, Mikkel. 100% of them had at least one contaminant above an MCL. Most of the community members were interested in a long-term solution. It likely would have been consolidation, or likely will be. And there was about 73 households in the project area and we left off, we finalized a feasibility study, and that's kind of the last technical assistance action that CWC did for the project. We started working in the area in the summer, or we started outreach in the summer of 2023, and work was kind of initiated in the area. Monterey County did this like big report on disadvantaged communities in regards to drinking water and wastewater, and identified this area outside of Greenfield as one of those disadvantaged communities. And there was actually like TA work started, and they got to like the 30% design phase, and ran into some difficulties. And so the project ended up being handed off to CWC. We kind of took over, we did some well testing, and we looked at the area a little more broadly, thinking about how we could expand it, because the original project area, or the original households that were identified, was smaller than what we ended up with. And oops, we submitted an assistance request, and one of like the biggest advocacy or outreach successes was we supported the community in being properly identified in the municipal services review for Greenfield as a disadvantaged unincorporated community with immediate drinking water needs. The area had like not previously been acknowledged or identified in any of like Greenfield's public documents or county documents. So that was like a big success for us. The community members did form a CBO, and let's see, project scoping. Yeah, we basically got through the feasibility study phase on the TA side of things for Juana Ave. I think the next slide here is just summary of the drinking water issues. Like I said, all the wells that we sampled had one or more contaminants over the MCL. Nitrate and 1,2,3-TCP were the main contaminants of concern in the area. Next slide. Again, we had a lot of support in the community for a long-term solution, and had gotten in touch with everyone in the community. So like shout out to Pedro and Myra and Shirley and our outreach team for being so successful in building those relations and forming that trust in the community. And next slide, the current project status is that CWC has closed out this project. After we finished the feasibility study, the city of Greenfield decided that they felt motivated to take the project over from there and take the feasibility study under advisement and move forward with a potential consolidation project. So once they stated that, the state water board said, okay, like CWC, let them take this on. And so in March, we did kind of like some project closeout outreach. We made phone calls to all of the households and participants in the project to like let them know that this transition is happening. We're kind of talking in-house now about how to support the community and keeping the city of Greenfield accountable, because they haven't been super friendly or helpful up to this point. So there's some concern about how seriously they're taking this project on, and how if they will have an appropriate sense of urgency. So there may be some continued or future advocacy support for the community, but the TA part of the project is concluded for now. And that's a summary of Juana Ave. Are there any questions on that project? Or Myra, if you have anything to add. I know Pedro's not here. Go ahead, Robin.
I just had a question about, I remember I went out there for a community meeting once and their well had gone dry, and that was kind of a new thing to see on the Central Coast. Can you speak a little to
Mhm.
that?
So we had one community member whose well went dry. We're not sure exactly what happened, if the like well caved in or it truly did the water level dropped below where the bottom of the well was. The well was probably about 100 feet deep, which is relatively shallow, even compared to just his immediate neighbors. So, and like we're supporting him in the effort to get that fixed. But yeah, that's not like something we see super commonly up here. So that I think Pedro coordinated a lot with the valley and like really had to do a little extra work to find resources to support that kind of problem in the Central Coast because it's not as common here. And that like support is ongoing. But yeah, that was, just another issue to compound the necessity for drinking water access in this community.
Just to add a little bit too, his neighbor Dario has run like a pipe from his well to Don Serafin's well that went dry, to the storage tank. So like the neighbor is helping provide water to the household for the time being. That has also like caused, from what I understand, Dario's pump to like go out once. So he's had to like replace some pieces of his own water system to be able to support his neighbor. And this Friday, Dario is going to speak about this situation to the Drip Collaborative, really like highlighting the need for better and stronger coordination for these kind of efforts, especially in regions where there's no support currently to help households where, there's drought impacts. So there's a lot of like connections to also how do we support folks in the valley when these kind of emergencies happen, and better coordination and collaboration across agencies is needed. But it just also highlights like how neighbors oftentimes step up and have answers really quickly for each other. And their leadership has been huge throughout this process as well.
Thanks for highlighting that, Brendan. Any other questions or things to add about Wanna Ave before we move on?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. So obviously in the valley, when someone's well goes dry, we contact self-help and they'll come out and put a storage tank. So what you're saying is that is not a resource available in the Central Coast?
Pedro's been leading that coordination, but I feel like if that resource was available, we would have figured that out.
Yeah,
And I
that's
don't think that
correct.
we have.
That's a
Yeah.
program that Self-Help does, but Self-Help doesn't work in our region. CWC is actually the bottled water provider in the Central Coast, and we don't have a program to provide tanked water. So there is not an equivalent program for dry wells on the Central Coast right now.
Yeah, I think the workaround Pedro was working with a contractor and they found some funding through like ag because Don Serafine has like goats and there's some like small farm funding type thing. You have to follow up with Pedro to get the details on that. He's really been leading that. I'm sorry, I don't have better answers for those questions.
Another resource, I guess, would also be self-help that provides the low income well for a new well. Although what we've noticed is that it's still a huge burden for residents to have to go through that program because I think the difference is like between 40,000 for building your own well or 20,000 if you qualify for the low income, quote unquote, low income um, program through self-help. So yeah, I was just wondering what was the equivalent of self-help in the Central Coast, and that's really difficult to wrap my head around that there's not something equivalent to it. Thank you.
One thing too, anecdotally, is that Serafin, so they'd worked with Dudek to try and find out what kind of costs would be associated and what would be needed to replace the well. It was really high, and so we also worked with Weber Hayes, which we're going to jump into the TCP pilot project. Their team like helped also provide additional quotes, but Serafin was like planning on retiring pretty soon, and unfortunately, because of the situation, he's been anecdotally sharing that he's going to continue working to try and save up the money to replace as well. So it's just another like sense of urgency that is highlighting trying to push this city to advance this project. And as Haley said, they're not really great partners or like invested in advancing this. And so I think that's also like helping motivate some of the community residents to think about what accountability looks like and how do we push the city to move this project forward.
Thanks, Brendan. Happy to talk more about Wanna Ave if people have questions after this or want to chat me or Pedro. Please feel free. But moving on, and this is going to be like the Haley show for the rest of this because I think the next two projects are mine also. But we'll go into the TCP project. And these last two projects, the TCP project and the West project, are a little different than our usual TA projects because they're like primarily research focused with like the overall overarching goal of like informing long-term solutions. But the approach is a little bit different because it's really more information gathering than finding the quickest route to a long-term solution. Like it is still that, but it's a little different. So the TCP pilot project in the Central Coast, we have some pictures here of what some of the systems look like that are in the project. On the picture on the far left, we have a community member standing next to their system. There's two large tanks of granulated activated carbon. And the water basically comes out of the well, flows through these tanks, and those tanks filter out the TCP. There are pros and cons to this type of filtration, and that's kind of the basis of this project, is figuring out the capacity of this type of filtration system to be a long-term solution in situations where consolidation isn't really feasible, where a property is so far removed from an existing water system, or it's just not feasible to connect that. Like consolidation isn't going to be their solution. So what are the alternatives for these households? And what is that cost going to be? What is the effectiveness? What are the pros and cons of this type of solution? And so we started organizing in the north of Moss Landing area for this project and did some well testing and identified water quality issues. So it's important to note that this project focuses on 123 TCP filters, but all of these households have additional contaminants. So even this filter is not getting them to a point where they can drink their well water or their tap water. And also through this program, people are connected to bottled water. So we did this water sampling, got them connected to drinkable water, which in most cases was bottled water. And TCP is still a concern, even if you're not drinking the water, because it is harmful in the vapor form. So when the water gets hot and there's steam, you can inhale that can get on your skin. It can aggravate any orifice or membrane. So it's still a concern, even if you're not drinking it. If you're washing dishes with hot water, if you're cooking with the water, or taking hot showers, things like that. And so this pilot was developed to address 123 TCP specifically. The goals are just reducing exposure to that contaminant and figuring out and being transparent about how much it actually costs to operate these things. What are the real world needs to operate and manage this type of system? And what are the costs and pros and cons of it? We have 16 systems currently in operation. So it's 16 households. And for like the day-to-day of the project or month-to-month of the project, we work with Weber Hayes and Associates to monthly sample the product water, so the water that's after the filters, to make sure that the filters are working properly and there's no TCP, as well as for bacteria and HPC. So we do that monthly. And while they're there taking those samples, they do like a general maintenance check and make sure things are working properly, things don't need replaced, there's no damage, things like that. And then quarterly, we'll sample the source water. So like the water from the well before the filter. Next slide. This is a little map of where the systems are. We kind of got them spread out a little bit, which is nice. And yeah, that's just a map of where the current systems are. You can go to the next slide. Again, this is a picture of like a couple examples of the systems that we have in operation. All the systems have 2 tanks, with the idea that there's the lead tank, so the water that the tank that the water goes through first, and the lag tank, the tank that the water goes through second. The idea being, once the carbon in the lead tank gets used up and is like too full of contamination to continue properly filtering, that the second tank will catch whatever the first tank doesn't. So it's a little bit of insurance. Is there any questions about that? That's the general idea. Okay, great. Next slide. Oh, that's Wes. Okay, wait, go back to TCP. Go back 1 slide. Just, are there any questions on that? This is a pilot project. It's funded by SAFER. So this is like more of a research type project that SAFER is funding, that's still informing long-term drinking water solutions. It's a really cool project. And again, it's more thinking about long-term solutions, decentralized long-term solutions. What do we do for these houses where consolidation isn't really an option? And again, this is only addressing TCP, so it'd likely have to be a combination of filters, but this is like one piece of the puzzle. Are there any questions about that project?
Haley, I know that the funding for this was recently reestablished, or the timeline was extended, and that was interesting to think about how this decentralized solution that's impacting households in Moss Landing, how that would, if the project wasn't extended, how that would impact houses that have the solution that are part of the PSMS project that are getting this benefit currently, and kind of just thinking about those timelines for the different types of projects. And curious if you want to share anything about how challenging or supportive it was to extend the timeline for this funding for this project.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Mikkel can maybe speak a little bit more to like the logistics of that funding extension, but like, so the funding recently got extended 2 more years to June 2028. We had to go and like get everybody to re-sign the contract saying like monitoring can still be done, you're still like willing to have these systems at your house, etc. And did some outreach around that, and overwhelmingly people were grateful to have these continue to be paid for and have this filter and the service for free for another 2 years. It's a little less impactful or less maybe not really, for people who have a long-term solution on the way, like in PSMS or Springfield. But it is just another 2 years to bridge that gap. If we ran out of that funding now, and then they just have this awkward amount of time between when they or either have to pay for this filter themselves or lose it and then get connected to a long-term solution. So for some people, they have kind of a light at the end of the tunnel with a long-term solution on the way, but several households in the project don't. So you have an interesting split of people who are looking at this differently as like a truly temporary solution and a potential long-term solution. So it's great that we have it for 2 more years. We can guarantee the funding and continue to gather data and input from the community members on what that ultimate transition should and could look like for those who don't have an alternative long-term solution on the horizon. Mikkel, do you want to add anything there?
I'll just be super brief. Yeah, Robin, to answer your question, it was funded through the Central Coast Regional Water Board to begin with, and then we switched it to SAFER, and now we re-upped it once. So we can touch base if you're curious about the logistics there. But yeah, just to add on what Haley was saying, folks, we've recently went out and did conversations with pretty much everyone and got a new contract signed, and it's awesome to everyone is so grateful that's part of this project. And so that's really great to hear, and they are really appreciative of having this system and kind of what Weber Hayes does and kind of our role in this. And so, yeah, like Haley's saying, I'll just echo the idea is to have this be something that is an interim solution until they get a long-term solution. And for the folks that can't have a long-term solution, feasibly, getting connected easily to a nearby water system, we're exploring, a decentralized pilot approach for that too. So there's a lot to come. I will say we're at 12, so if folks need to drop off, feel free, but I think we can wrap up with Wes, and if folks are able to stay on, that'd be great too.
Thanks, Mikkel. Should be pretty quick. So WES is short for the Water Equity Science Shop at UC Berkeley. And we partnered with them to do a PFAS research project in both the Central Coast and the Valley. The project started being information back in 2021, but we started actually collecting PFAS samples in 2024, I'm pretty sure. And the intention was to collect PFAS data from private domestic wells in rural areas where they're really, as we know, those are generally neglected areas where we don't have a lot of data. So to kind of get the ball rolling in collecting data in those areas for PFAS specifically, and potentially identify previously unidentified sources of exposure in those rural areas, or maybe find out that there isn't any, which is not what we found, but that was the goal. We've been working with UC Berkeley. I put the official project aims over here. The aim 1 we weren't really involved in, but was a branch of the project. We were really on the aim 2 and aim 3 zone. The original goal was to sample 100 households. We didn't end up getting quite that many. We ended up with, we can go to the next slide actually. We ended up doing 70 samples total, 70 wells sampled, 35 in each region. And we sampled all the sites for nitrate, arsenic, hexchrome, TCP, and then 70 different PFAS species, which is a very extensive list. That's not typical, but we really wanted to get a wide swath. And we found we were sampling some small water systems as well, and we really did find PFAS in a lot of wells that we didn't necessarily expect to. There was PFAS we didn't expect to see. The research is still, we basically are like finished with the data collection, but the analysis and like the publishing is still to come, and Berkeley's taking the lead on that. CWC was really the conduit into these communities because we have so many great relationships with these communities already, and we conducted the sampling itself. And so that sampling is all wrapped up in the Central Coast now. It kind of has morphed in the valley. So you can ask Lauren more about that. But they're still doing water sampling in the valley for these things as well as phthalates, but it's kind of morphed into a different project. And so that's the West project. Are there any questions? I know we're like out of time, and that's really like the quick and dirty summary. Otherwise, I think that's it for me.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free to reach out to any of us if there's any questions or follow-ups. But yeah, I appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully this was informative.
Thank you.
Have a nice
That's
lunch.
great information. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone.
Guys.
Yeah.
Bye.